you're enjoying this control panel building series, if you're seeing this clip, then you've entered in the middle of the series, so make sure you go back to part 1 and see it all the way through. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe and tell us in the comments what you think about this video series and what you'd like to see the next one on. Alright, so now that we have most of our internal wiring done, we're ready to set the panel into the enclosure. Now a few things. One, I know you think it's a doctor show now, but check your hands, make sure they're clean. And also, even though I have the enclosure out again, I try to keep plastic all the way around it just to protect it from getting scratched. Now before you set the panel into the enclosure, take one more time to vacuum the enclosure out really good and wipe it all down, because it's much easier to do now than once you have things in it. And then also pay attention to your panel weight. You know, if this panel is particularly heavy, either get somebody to help you, or in our case we do have hoist when they're heavy. Alright, now that we have our panel in our enclosure, we're going to want to immediately bolt this down. And even if, say, you have to temporarily put the panel in the enclosure, say to get it out of the way, or to just close it up at night to keep it from getting dirty, you want to bolt it in. I'll share a story about it was probably the third panel I ever built. It was in a machine shop, so it was a lot dirtier than here. And so every evening I would put the panel into the enclosure and close it up. Next morning I'd open it back up, take it back out. Well, I got into that habit, and so on the final time I did the same thing. I put it in, I closed it up, I packaged it up, I shipped it out without any bolts in it. And by the time the trucking company was done with it, the inside of the enclosure was pretty torn up. So bolt it in, even if it's only temporary. Also, your enclosure mounting kit probably came with a star washer like this. Make sure you use it on one of the studs. That is for grounding purposes. We'll put an article in the description about grounding enclosures to panels and enclosures to the door. Because also right here, we'll show you in a second installing, there needs to be a wire put from this stud that's on the inside of this enclosure wall to this stud on the door. Since we're permanently mounting this enclosure, we're going to go ahead and torque it down. Now, along with bolting the enclosure down, even if you're only temporarily setting it in, if for any reason you shut the door, go ahead and latch the latches on it. Even if you're just latching it just to walk away. Because if you go to move it and the door isn't latched, or scarily you go to ship it and the door isn't latched, then it could swing open and hit something and scratch it up. So now I'm going to hook up that grounding strap that I was talking about. We'll put a link in the description to talk more about that. Alright, so pretty much I take a short piece of wire. I put a ring terminal on each end of it. Also, early on I told you that I used your typical hardware store wire strippers. That's only for stripping and cutting wire. When it comes to crimping wire, get you a good high quality crimper. And there's a different crimper usually for insulated and non-insulated terminals. Now that our panel's in our enclosure and we put our grounds up and everything's bolted in, we need to put one hole in the outside of this enclosure. And we're going to use these cutters to do it. And we have a whole video that you can find in the description on hole cutting. The only advice I'm going to give you here is we only need one hole, so really I could grab my drill and just drill it anywhere. But try to have a scheme where it be that you're 2 inches over, 2 inches up, or something. Because while we only need one hole in this one, what happens when you need to drill a second hole? If you drilled the first one at, say, 1 inch and 11/64ths, then it makes it really hard to be consistent. So go ahead, and even though we're going to drill one hole, we're going to lay out, make a mark, and then we're going to drill it. In our hole that we've drilled in our panel, we're going to use a compression fitting. This is another object that a lot of people use the wrong product for the application. We're going to be using this cable, and we're going to go through this compression fitting, and then as you tighten it down, it squeezes around this, and this makes a sealed connection. A lot of times you'll see Romex connectors in panels and things like that. It doesn't do any good to have a NEMA 4 panel if you're going to put a connection in here that isn't dust resistant. Also, if you use a plastic fitting, use a plastic nut. The plastic ones, if you put the metal nuts on them, a lot of time they'll start peeling and then you won't be able to get them tight, so you'll grab them and they'll be a little loose in there. The plastic nuts work really good on the back of the plastic fittings. Also, there are some tools for tightening these up that make a really clean look. I don't actually have one of them, so I try to use a really nice, clean, square, adjustable wrench. One thing I would say is don't grab a pair of channel locks and go at it, because you'll see the channel lock bite marks on the fitting. It's a good time to check your hands. I'm going to install the disconnect shaft here and drill the handle, and we have a whole video on that, and I will put a link to it in the description. I'm also going to go ahead and cut the wire duct down. Now, why didn't I cut the wire duct till now? Mainly because it's not needed, so it ends up laying around getting dirty, so I just wait till last to cut it. Also, sometimes I cut the wire duct and find out I need to, reconfigure it, make it longer or something, and that way at least I've only wasted the wire duct and not the cover. Alright, one more thing before we put the wire duct cover on is to heat shrink all of our labels. Now when you're heat shrinking, be very careful because the wire duct can easily melt if you put too much heat on it. But make sure they're all lined up really nicely. And then it only takes a few seconds of heat on each one of them. And that'll heat shrink them down. Just keep checking them as you go. Make sure nothing looks odd. You want it to look as uniform as possible. Okay, now we're ready to install our wire duct cover. Now, if you notice, this piece right here is kind of difficult to figure out exactly what the measurement it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these pieces first. Since I've been sawing, it's a good time to check your hands again. Make sure there's no wires hanging out of your wire duct cover, before you put them on. Alright, now that I have the two outer pieces on, it's really easy to get a measurement for this long piece. Alright, check your hands again since you've been sawing. Alright, that's it for the inside of this. So next we're going to install our disconnect handle and shaft, and we have a whole video on that, so I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on that. We'll wire our pendant and then we're going to test it out. Remember, we have a whole video on how to do that shaft lineup. Hi, this is Tim.
And this is Amber of TW Controls.
We run the automation store.
Be sure to subscribe for more great videos.
And like this video and comment on what you would like to see next.
Visit our website where we offer a full line of PLCs, simulators, control panels, PLC trainers, and more.